I stood in my father's living room holding the award I'd just won. I felt the weight of the crystal trophy in my hands. I'd spent 4 years working toward this moment. 4 years of late nights, rejected pitches, and doubting myself. I watched Dad look at the award. I saw him glance at the engraving. I noticed his expression didn't change, not even a flicker of interest. Then he looked me dead in the eyes and said it. "Nothing about you makes us proud, Daniel. Not one thing." I felt the words hit me like a punch to the chest. I heard him say it with the same tone someone uses when stating a simple fact, like he was telling me the sky was blue or water was wet. He didn't whisper it. I noticed he didn't hesitate. I realized he'd been thinking this for a long time and finally decided to say it out loud. I looked past him to where Mom stood. I watched her arms crossed over her chest. I saw her nod slowly, agreeing with every word Dad had just said. I felt my throat tighten. I knew I should say something. I understood I should defend myself, but I couldn't find the words. The worst part? I'd recorded the whole conversation. I had my phone in my jacket pocket with the voice recorder running. I'd started recording the moment I walked through their front door because I already knew they wouldn't believe me later. I recognized this pattern. I'd lived my entire life. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 27 years old. I work as an animator and game design freelancer. I create characters, build worlds, tell stories through digital art. According to my parents, I'm the greatest disappointment the Carter family has ever produced. But the world didn't seem to agree with them. Not then, and definitely not later. I grew up in a house where achievement meant everything. I watched my parents measure success in very specific ways. Good grades, sports trophies, traditional careers, things they could brag about at church or family gatherings. My younger brother, Kyle, fit that mold perfectly. I remember he was captain of the basketball team in high school. I recall he made honor roll every semester. I knew everyone voted him most likely to succeed senior year. I watched Dad beam with pride at every one of Kyle's accomplishments. I noticed how he'd tell everyone about Kyle's scholarship offers. I saw how he kept every newspaper clipping that mentioned Kyle's name. I was different. I was a kid who drew in notebooks during class. I spent hours creating characters and designing storyboards. I built little indie games on my computer that nobody in my family cared about. At least they didn't care. I remember every time I showed them something I'd made, Dad would shake his head. "Artist starve, Daniel." He'd say, "Get a real job." Mom would add her piece too. "Can't you be more like your brother?" I heard those words so many times they became background noise. I remember when I got my acceptance letter. I'd applied to one of the top animation programs in the country. I knew it was competitive. I understood thousands of students applied every year. Only 100 got in. I got in. I ran downstairs with the letter in my hand. I felt my heart pounding with excitement. I found my parents in the kitchen. Dad was reading the newspaper. Mom was making coffee. I got accepted. I said. I held up the letter. The animation program. I got in. I watched Dad look up from his newspaper. I saw him read the letter I was holding. I noticed his expression change from curiosity to disappointment. Then he laughed. Not a happy laugh. A dismissive one. "A cartoon school?" he said. I heard the mockery in his voice. "We're not paying for that nonsense." I felt my excitement drain away. "Dad, this is a really prestigious program. People travel from all over the world." "You want to draw pictures for a living," he interrupted. I watched him fold his newspaper. "That's not a career. That's a hobby." Mom turned from the coffee maker. "Daniel, be realistic. You need a real education. Business, engineering, law, something stable." I tried to explain. I told him about the program's success rate. I mentioned the alumni who worked at major studios. I listed the companies that recruited directly from the school. They didn't want to hear it. I watched Dad stand up and leave the kitchen. I saw Mom follow him without another word. I paid for school myself. I worked night shifts at a warehouse. I took out student loans. I sold my motorcycle that I'd spent 2 summers saving for. I made it work. I graduated 4 years later. I remember the ceremony was beautiful. I watched my classmates walk across the stage. I heard their families cheer and clap. I saw parents crying with pride. My parents didn't come. I'd sent them an invitation 3 months in advance. I'd called to remind them. I'd even offered to pay for their hotel. They said they were busy. Dad had a golf tournament. Mom had plans with her book club. I walked across that stage alone. I heard my name called. I accepted my diploma while scanning the crowd for faces I knew wouldn't be there. My roommates' parents cheered for me. They'd seen me working late every night for 4 years. They understood what this moment meant. After graduation, I didn't hear from my parents for 6 months. No congratulations call. No card. Nothing. I found work at a small animation studio. I took freelance projects on the side. I built my portfolio slowly and carefully. I entered every competition I could find. 3 years passed like that. I worked. I improved. I grew. Then I won the Best Independent Character Design Award at a major industry expo. I learned I'd beaten over 3,000 other submissions. I discovered studios were reaching out. I noticed brands requesting meetings. I thought maybe now things would be different. I believed maybe this achievement would finally make them see me. I decided to visit them. I drove 2 hours to their house. I brought the award to show them. I thought we could share a moment. I hoped we could finally connect. I was wrong. I walked through their front door, holding the crystal trophy. I felt nervous. I realized I was actually scared of their reaction. That should have told me everything I needed to know. Mom opened the door. I watched her look at the trophy in my hands. I saw her eyebrows raise slightly. "What's that?" she asked. "An award," I said. I held it up so she could read the engraving. I won Best Independent Character Design at the National Animation Expo. I watched her read it. I noticed she didn't smile. I saw her nod once, then step aside to let me in. "Your father's in the living room," she said. I walked in to find Dad sitting in his recliner. I noticed he was watching television. Some news program about the stock market. "Hi, Dad," I said. I held up the award. "I wanted to show you something." He glanced at me. I saw him look at the trophy. I watched his expression remain completely neutral. "What is it?" he asked. "It's an award for character design. It's a pretty big deal in the animation industry." I moved closer so he could see it better. Over 3,000 people entered. I won. I waited for something. Congratulations. A smile. Any sign of pride. Instead, Dad stepped back. I watched him scoff. I heard the dismissive sound he made. "This isn't real success, Daniel," he said. I noticed he was looking at me like I'd disappointed him again. "You haven't done anything meaningful with your life." I felt the familiar sting. I knew this feeling well. I'd experienced it countless times growing up, but somehow it still hurt. Mom walked into the living room. I watched her stand next to Dad. I saw them present a united front like they always did. "Kyle gave us grandchildren," Mom said. I heard her voice take on that comparison tone I knew so well. "He bought a house. He has a real career. You draw cartoons." I noticed how she said cartoons like it was something dirty. Like I was wasting my life on something childish and meaningless. "Dad," I said carefully. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I've worked my entire life for this. This is a national award. This is recognition from the top professionals in my field." He shrugged. I watched him actually shrug like what I'd said meant nothing. "Kyle's real estate company made 6 figures last month," he said. I heard pride in his voice when he talked about Kyle. "That's something to be proud of. That's real achievement." Mom added quickly, "You spend your time making little animations for strangers online. That's not what we wanted for you." I felt that familiar burn in my chest. I recognized this wasn't about the award. I understood this was about who they wanted me to be versus who I actually was. That's why I'd started recording the moment I walked through the door. I knew they would do this. I realized they would dismiss my achievement and compare me to Kyle. I needed proof this time. I understood they would deny saying these things later. They always did. I left their house 20 minutes later. I felt numb during the entire drive home. I replayed their words in my head. I wondered why I'd expected anything different. When I got home, I listened to the recording. I heard Dad's voice clearly. "Nothing about you makes us proud, Daniel. Not one thing." I saved the file to 3 different places. I backed it up to the cloud. I knew I would need it eventually. 2 days later, something unexpected happened. I woke up to hundreds of notifications on my phone. I checked my social media and saw my follower count had jumped by thousands overnight. I discovered a famous gaming content creator had reviewed a game I'd helped design. I watched his video. He had 11 million subscribers. I heard him say my name multiple times. "The character design in this game is incredible," he said in the video. I listened to him analyze my work frame by frame. "This is the most refreshing approach I've seen in years. Daniel Carter is someone to watch." I watched the video hit 1 million views, then 2 million, then 5 million. My inbox exploded with messages. Studios I'd only dreamed of working with were reaching out. Brands wanted to collaborate. Industry legends were commenting on my portfolio. Then something even bigger happened. A major animation studio reposted my award photo. I watched it get shared thousands of times. I saw my name trending. An animation director whose movies had defined my childhood tweeted about me. I read his words over and over. "The future of character design is Daniel Carter. Remember that name." I waited for my parents to reach out. I knew they had social media. I understood they must have seen what was happening. I figured surely now they would call or text. Silence. I checked my phone constantly. I looked for their names in my notifications. I found nothing, but other people noticed. I watched strangers online discover my story. I saw them find my portfolio. I noticed them share my interviews from years ago. Comments flooded in. "Your work is incredible. This is Pixar quality art. Your parents must be so proud." I read that last comment and felt something bitter rise in my throat. If only they knew. Local news outlets started covering the story. I received interview requests. Podcasts wanted me as a guest. My small hometown newspaper ran a feature article. That's when my brother Kyle finally texted me. I read his message 3 times. "Dude, Mom and Dad are freaking out. People at church keep asking why they never mention you. Mrs. Henderson said she had no idea you were so successful." I understood what that meant. Now they cared. Not because they were proud. Not because they'd had a change of heart. But because other people were asking questions. Because their silence about me was starting to look bad. I didn't respond to Kyle's text. I had nothing to say. 3 days later, Mom called. I saw her name on my screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Daniel," Mom said when I answered. I heard nervousness in her voice. "Your father and I want to talk to you. Can you come over this weekend?" I thought about saying no. I considered telling her I was busy, but I was curious. I wanted to see what they would say now that the world was watching. "Fine," I said, Saturday afternoon. I drove to their house that weekend. I felt different this time. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't hoping for their approval. I was simply curious about what performance they would put on. I walked in to find both of them sitting on the couch. I noticed they looked uncomfortable. I saw Dad fidgeting with his watch. I observed Mom smoothing her pants repeatedly. "Daniel," Dad started. I heard him clear his throat. "We want to apologize. We didn't realize how significant your achievement was." I said nothing. I just watched them. Mom jumped in quickly. "We were surprised by the award. You know we've always wanted the best for you. We just didn't understand the animation industry." I felt anger building in my chest. I watched them try to rewrite history. I saw them attempt to soften what they'd said 2 weeks earlier. I pulled out my phone. I watched their expressions change. I noticed fear flash across Mom's face. I pressed play. Their own voices filled the living room. Clear, undeniable. "Nothing about you makes us proud, Daniel. Not one thing. Kyle's real estate company made 6 figures last month. That's something to be proud of. You spend your time making little animations for strangers online." I watched Mom's hand fly to her mouth. I saw Dad's face drain of all color. I noticed him lean back like the recording had physically pushed him. "Turn it off," Mom whispered. I stopped the recording. I looked at both of them. I kept my voice calm and steady. "You don't get to rewrite this," I said. I felt years of hurt channeling into these words. "This was you. These are your actual words. This is who you've been to me my entire life." Dad opened his mouth. I watched him struggle to find words. Nothing came out. "We didn't mean it like that," Mom finally said. I heard desperation in her voice. "You're taking out of context." "What context makes those words acceptable?" I asked. I kept my voice level. "What context makes it okay to tell your son you're not proud of anything about him?" Silence filled the room. I watched them look at each other. I saw them searching for an explanation that would make this better. They found none. "I'm leaving," I said. I stood up. "Don't call me unless you're ready to be honest. I'm done with the denial. I'm done with the gaslighting. I'm done pretending this is a normal family." I walked to the door. I heard Mom start to cry behind me. I felt Dad's eyes on my back. I kept walking. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. I realized I'd spent my whole life seeking their approval. I understood now I would never get it. And for the first time, I was okay with that. 3 days later, I received an email from a journalist. She was writing a feature story about emerging artists who'd overcome adversity. She wanted to interview me. I agreed. We talked for 2 hours. I told her about my journey. I mentioned the struggles with my family. I didn't play the recording for her, but I told her what my parents had said. The article published a week later. I read the headline and felt my stomach drop. "Meet the animator whose parents told him he'd never be enough until the world proved otherwise." The article was beautiful. She'd captured my story perfectly. She'd highlighted my work and my perseverance. She quoted industry leaders who praised my talent. But one section went viral. The part where she quoted my father's exact words. "Nothing about you makes us proud." I watched the article spread across every social media platform. I saw thousands of shares. I read hundreds of comments from people sharing their own stories of unsupportive families. My phone rang constantly. Mom called 6 times. Dad called 4 times. Kyle sent a dozen texts. I ignored them all. I knew what they wanted. They wanted me to somehow make this better for them. They wanted me to issue a statement saying the quote was taken out of context. But it wasn't. The journalist had quoted my father exactly. She hadn't twisted anything. She'd simply reported what happened. My phone rang again. This time it was Dad. I answered. "How could you do this to us?" Dad's voice was sharp with anger. I heard betrayal in his tone. "That article made us look terrible. The whole town is talking about it." I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. "I didn't make you look terrible, Dad. I told the truth. You made yourself look terrible when you said those words." "We didn't know she would write that." Mom's voice came through the speaker. I realized she was on the call too. "You humiliated the family. People are calling us horrible parents." "Are they wrong?" I asked quietly. Silence. "You made your choice," I continued. I kept my voice steady. "You chose to diminish me instead of support me. You chose to compare me to Kyle instead of accepting me as I am. You chose to be embarrassed by my career until other people validated it. Those were your choices. I just stopped hiding them." "Daniel," Dad started. "I'm done with this conversation." I interrupted. I felt tired suddenly. "When you're ready to actually apologize, not just try to control the narrative, call me. Until then, leave me alone." I hung up. I turned off my phone. I sat in my apartment surrounded by my artwork and felt peace I hadn't experienced in years. The controversy died down after a few weeks. The article became old news. But the recognition of my work continued. I signed with a major studio. I started working on projects I'd only dreamed about. Life moved forward. I moved forward. Without them, a year passed. I threw myself into my work. I created characters for a major animated series. I designed worlds for a video game that won multiple awards. I spoke at industry conferences. I didn't hear from my parents during that entire year. I saw Kyle occasionally. He'd reached out a few months after the article. We'd met for coffee. They're in therapy, he'd told me. I'd seen concern in his eyes. Both of them. Together and separately. I'd nodded but said nothing. I didn't know what to feel about that information. Dad talks about you sometimes, Kyle continued. I watched him stir his coffee nervously. He's starting to understand how badly he messed up. How badly they both did. That's good, I'd said. I meant it. But I also wasn't ready to engage. Now, a full year later, I received an email from Dad. I stared at his name in my inbox for a long time before opening it. The email was long. I read it 3 times. He wrote about therapy, about realizing he projected his own failures onto me, about understanding he'd measured success by his own narrow definition. I spent your whole life comparing you to Kyle because I thought success only looked one way, he wrote. I was wrong. I was so wrong. And I'm sorry. I'm truly, deeply sorry. The email continued. He didn't make excuses. He didn't try to minimize what he'd done. He simply acknowledged it and took responsibility. Mom sent an email too. Hers was shorter but equally raw. She talked about family expectations, about how she'd been raised to value certain things over others, about how she'd failed to see who I actually was because she was too busy wishing I was someone else. I didn't respond immediately. I sat with her emails for a week. I read them multiple times. I talked to my therapist about them. I needed to process what I was feeling. Finally, I called them. Dad answered on the second ring. Daniel, he said. I heard emotion in his voice. Thank you for calling. I got your emails, I said. I kept my voice neutral. Both of them. I meant every word, Dad said quickly. We both did. We know we can't undo what we said, what we did, but we want to try to do better. If you'll let us. I took a deep breath. I'm not ready to just forgive and forget. What you both did hurt me deeply. It affected how I saw myself for years. We know. Mom's voice came through. She was on the call too. We're not asking you to forget. We're asking for a chance to rebuild. Slowly. On your terms. I thought about that. I considered what I wanted. What I needed. Therapy. I said finally. Family therapy. All of us together. If you're serious about rebuilding, that's where we start. Yes, Dad said immediately. Whatever you need. Okay, I said. I'll find a therapist who specializes in family dynamics. We'll start there. We talked for another hour. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't easy. But it was honest. For the first time in my life, we had an honest conversation. I hung up feeling cautiously hopeful. Not fixed. Not healed. But maybe, possibly, on a path toward something better. 5 years have passed since that conversation in my parents' living room. 5 years since Dad said nothing about me made them proud. 5 years since everything changed. My career has taken me places I never imagined. I've worked on 3 major animated films. I've designed characters that children dress up as for Halloween. I've spoken at conferences around the world. My work has been featured in museums. At conventions, young artists approach me constantly. You're the reason I didn't give up, they tell me. I hear my own story reflected in theirs. I understand how much representation matters. My relationship with my parents is different now. Better isn't the right word. Rebuilt feels more accurate. We went to family therapy for 2 years. We had hard conversations. We acknowledged painful truths. Dad keeps a framed poster for my first major film in his office now. Mom shows my artwork to everyone she meets. When I visit, they ask real questions about my projects. They listen when I talk about my work. But sometimes I still wonder, if the world hadn't recognized me first, would they have ever seen me at all? If that gaming creator hadn't made his video, if that article hadn't gone viral, would they still think I was wasting my life? I don't ask them that question. I know it would hurt them. I understand they've worked hard to change, but I also know the answer. And knowing it has changed me fundamentally. I don't need their approval anymore. I know my worth. I understand my value. I recognize my own success without requiring their validation. That's the real victory. Not the awards or the recognition or the career success. The victory is knowing who I am and being proud of myself. Because at the end of the day, the only person whose approval I truly needed was my own. And I have that now. Finally, completely I have that.